What's up, middle school? We are so excited that you have found your way to a house party tonight. We love getting together and hanging out and talking about Jesus together. And we think the best place to do that is on a couch with some chips or a cookie. But if you're on the couch, not a drink, because that ends poorly every single time. Hey, we are working our way through the Gospel of John to learn more about Jesus. We want to know him better. We want to walk with him so that we can walk like him. So tonight we're looking at John chapter 2. This chapter starts with Jesus, his mom, and his disciples at a wedding. Okay, the wedding's going great. Everyone is celebrating, hanging out, but all of a sudden they run out of wine, which is a big uh-oh, right? Like, people don't have anything to drink. They have lots of guests. They're like mid-wedding reception. What's everyone going to think if we're out of drinks? Blah, blah, blah. So Jesus' mom tells Jesus, hey, they're out of wine. Okay, and Jesus wonders, like, what does this have to do with me? He says, it's not my time yet. Meaning, he's saying, hey, it's not time for me to show all these people who I really am yet. Like, that's still kind of under the radar. And Jesus' mom kind of ignores that and then looks at some servants and tells them, hey, do whatever Jesus tells you to do, which is a classic mom move. So clearly, Jesus' mom understands at least a little bit who Jesus is. I mean, she knows he can do something special or something out of the ordinary about this situation. Because I don't think she's really asking Jesus to, like, hey, Jesus, can you go out in the field? Can you pick some grapes? Can you squish the grapes? Can you make some more wine for us? Like, I don't think that's what she's asking. So Jesus tells these servants, hey, go fill these big old jars up with water and serve that. Which is weird. They didn't ask for water, and these jars are not for drinking water anyway. But they do what Jesus says, and the guy in charge is like blown away at how tasty this jar water is, okay? Like, he makes this big statement about how they saved the very best for last because it turns out it's not water anymore, it's actually wine. And it's like the best wine he's ever had. Then, John makes this statement in verse 11. Jesus did this, the first of his signs, in Cana of Galilee. He revealed his glory, and his disciples believed in him. This is Jesus' first sign, his first miracle in the Gospel of John. It's called a sign because it's showing us who Jesus was. In the Old Testament, there were people who spoke for God, people he used to give messages to his people, leaders, judges, prophets. And oftentimes, to confirm the message they had was actually from God, a sign would be done, or like a miracle, something that would only be possible if God were the cause. My mind goes to the Old Testament. In the book of Exodus, chapter 4, we see God is telling a guy named Moses to go into Egypt and tell the Pharaoh God's message to let his people go. And Moses naturally is like, yeah, they're never going to believe me that God told me to do this. So God gives him these signs where he can throw his staff down and it like becomes a snake, which is crazy. And when he picks it back up, it's like a staff again. And when he puts his hand in his coat and pulls it out, it's covered in this weird, gross disease. But when it goes back in and out, it's like healed. He even has this one where he can turn water from the river into blood. God gave him these signs to Moses to show his message was from God, to prove it to be true. So all the signs in the Gospel of John are there for this reason, to prove that Jesus was who he said he was and to help people believe his message. And what was that message? That he is the Messiah, the Son of God, and that believing in him, mankind can find life, real, full life. And it clearly worked. I mean, John tells us the disciples, after they saw this, believed in him. In chapter 1, if you remember last week, we saw Jesus get a whole lot of important titles. He was named a lot of things. 7 titles, to be exact. There's the Lamb of God, the Son of God, Rabbi, which means teacher, Messiah, King of Israel, Jesus of Nazareth, and the Son of Man. That's a lot. And it's making some pretty bold claims that this guy from this random small town called Nazareth is the most important person in history. So, to back it up, John presents 7 signs. Now, remember what John said when he tells us why he wrote this. In John chapter 20, verse 30, he says, Jesus performed many other signs in the presence of his disciples that are not written in this book. But these are written so that you may believe that Jesus is the Messiah, the Son of God. John tells us these are definitely not the only signs. Jesus did a ton of crazy, amazing miracles. But John chose to tell us these specifically. So we should pay attention because these must be important. So when we look at this wedding and what Jesus did, how he treated people, how he acted, what he said, what does this sign tell us about Jesus?